Challenges don't come any bigger than fighting for your life. Try 9 years of it and counting. If you want inspiration and an example of what you can achieve with the right mindset, then look no further than Terry Tucker. Terry Tucker succeeds every day of his life. Let's go meet this remarkable man. Terry, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to Insights into Success today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you, particularly too because your story is quite extraordinary. And for me, it's got a lot of relevance because of my background and what I've experienced in my family. So I say with absolute sincerity, it's a real honor to have you on this podcast today. And yeah, I'm really interested to learn from you and to hear from you about the journey that you've been on, because it's one heck of a journey.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Well, there you go. And with technology, I'm in New Zealand, you're in Colorado. We couldn't be too much further apart. That's what I love about technology. It's amazing. And it's amazing, what I love about doing this is I get to meet people like you that ordinarily, there's no way I'd meet you. I wouldn't get to cross paths. So, technology has its disadvantages, but it has its pluses too. And to me, this is a big plus. I'm getting to talk to you today. So I think that's super cool. All right. So what I would like to do is for you to tell me your story, because, and I'm going to ask obviously questions through it, but, we've obviously offline, we've talked a bit about your background in that, and it's one heck of a journey. And if you're okay with it, I really would like for you to share that with me and our listeners and that, and be able to ask you some questions through that, if that was okay with you.
Sure. Yeah. You can ask me anything you want. There's nothing that's off limits or anything like that. I was born and raised in Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from my voice or from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I always tell people I quit smoking when I was 3, and I shot right up. So.
Oh my God! I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was like 6'4", and like you kind of just said, it's like when you're sitting down and doing an interview, you got no idea. And I mean, I just had no idea. I just and then you say this, like, holy heck! Wow, you should have played. Did you play basketball? Because you should have.
I played basketball in college, and I have a brother who's 6'7", another brother who's 6'6", and my dad was 6'5". So I sort of joked that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, there wasn't a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on, But our 5'8" mother was the boss. It didn't matter how big or tall or strong we were. Whatever mom said, that's the way it went. So,
well, yeah, one of the benefits, Terry, of not physically meeting you is I'm 6'1". So by not meeting you in physical presence, I don't feel short. So sitting here, it's okay, because I'd feel very short standing by you, even though I'm not that short, but definitely short compared to you.
Yeah, it's all kind of relative, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, my wife and I have one child, a daughter, who got my height and is 6'2", and is actually a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force here in the United States. So yeah, it's great for her, but it's all top secret. So, conversations are like, hey, how you doing? Good. How was work? I can't talk about it. Okay, good talking to you. So.
Hey, Terry, can I ask you this, since you brought this up? I had a friend who is 6'4", and he always complained and said that he felt that he was too tall, that he always stood out in the crowd, and said to me that he would prefer to be my height. Whereas I was like, hey, I wish I was kind of more your height. And he's like, no, I'd rather be your height. Just out of interest, how have you felt being tall like that? Is that something you have not been a problem for you? Or have you kind of like, yeah, you can't be so anonymous being that tall?
I mean, there are certain issues, clothes was always an issue, even cars, buying a car. I mean, we literally have to try on a car to see, does the gear shift hit us in the knee or things like that. But no, yeah. I've always loved being tall. I mean, yeah. I don't know, it's the narcissist in me that, when you walk into a room, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. People just look, yeah. It's always that, kind of situation. So I've always enjoyed being tall, and and I'm glad I am, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah. Oh, good on you. And I think anyway in life too, no matter what cards you're given, you've got to embrace it and be proud to be who you are, because gosh, if you don't love yourself, who's going to love you?
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
So anyway, we digress. So I'm keen to hear a little bit about your upbringing, and then obviously work through to, well, I won't spoil it, but telling us about, what's happened to you and how you've dealt with that.
Sure. So after I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but there was no internet available back then. And so I'm all set to make my mark on the world with my newly attained business administration degree. And I look back now and realize kind of what a knucklehead I was to think I knew anything about business just because I had a degree. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain,
Wow.
in their marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, cancer is it's sort of that common denominator that runs through our family. I guess in terms of my professional career, I've had quite a few jobs. I was in marketing at Wendy's, as I mentioned. Then I became a hospital administrator. Then I really pivoted and I became a police officer, and I did undercover narcotic work. I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. I started my own school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, been a motivational speaker. Last year became an author, but for the last 9 years, I've been dealing with this rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma that presented on my foot back in 2012. So that's a little bit about me. I told you about my wife and I have been married for 28 years.
Yeah.
And our one child is an officer in the new Space Force here in the U.S.
So Terry, your father's cancer, and I think, did you say his mother's cancer as well? Was that hereditary? What form of cancer did they have?
My dad had breast cancer, which back in the 1980s was incredibly rare. They really didn't know what to do for him. My grandmother, she was in her 80s. She had lymph cancer. I don't really think it was hereditary. I think it was just a product of old age. But my dad's mother had died of breast cancer, and my dad died of breast cancer. And it's funny because I didn't find this out till after my dad died. My mother used to always say that my dad didn't think he would live to be very old, and he died at 54. So, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. Wow. And the cancer, you got cancer and melanoma on the foot. So when you got it, what was your first reaction to getting that?
I was amazed. It was back in 2012, and I was coaching high school basketball, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot. And I didn't give it much thought initially, because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. So you're going to, have a little, blister here and things like that. But after a couple of weeks, when it didn't heal, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that would give either one of us concern. But he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, as he called me, and as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You need to go be treated at MD Anderson, which is probably one of the best cancer hospitals we have in the United States, if not the world. So, I remember when my dad died, I made a conscious decision that every year I would go to my doctor for a physical, whatever tests they recommended, I would do. I never abused alcohol or drugs. I was always athletic. I did everything right in my life. And yet I still got this very rare form of cancer.
So when you first got it, you found out about it, how did you cope with it? Did you sort of melt down at that point, or did you just sort of take it in your stride? And what were they saying at that stage? How serious did they indicate it was at that stage?
Well, they didn't know initially because they had to excise or cut out the tumor on the bottom of my foot, and they also did what they call a sentinel lymph node biopsy, where they actually inject a dye into that wound on the foot, and the dye travels up to your groins to the lymph nodes, and it marks whatever lymph nodes drain that area. For people who don't understand the lymph nodes, they're kind of like the sewer system of the body. They drain off excess fluid and different things like that. And there were 3 lymph nodes that kind of lit up during that biopsy, and they removed those. And one of them contained a microscopic amount of cancer. So they were like, we would recommend, but it's up to you. We would recommend that you remove all the lymph nodes in your groin just in case we might have missed something. And so that's what I ended up having done. And, it was just it was just like I was kind of having an out of body experience. I'm like, this can't be happening to me. I've done everything, and then you kind of get mad and you bargain and you do all, you feel sorry for yourself for a while. But eventually you get to the point where you're like, you know what? These are the cards that I've been dealt, and I've got to play them, and I've got to play them to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Yeah. So at that stage, you did what they said for you to do, and presumably they were kind of pretty confident about it. They, didn't seem like it had gone too far, and that they were being cautious, and you agreed to take all your lymph nodes out. So at that stage, I would imagine you were feeling pretty okay, that you're on top of it and you should be all good.
Yeah, you would think. Unfortunately, what my cancer, they usually stage cancer. So stage 1 through stage 4, stage 4 being the worst. Well, mine ended up being stage 3. So not the worst, but, second to the worst. And so my doctor put me on this drug called interferon, and it was a weekly injection that I took. And basically what interferon did for me was it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that wasn't a cure. That was just to try to keep the disease from coming back. So I remember when my doctor suggested that, I looked at her like, that's just cruel. I mean, I don't understand how you can ask a human being to do that. And she's like, just do the best you can, because they didn't have a lot of therapy for melanoma at that point in time. So it was, as she said, we're trying to kick the can down the road.
Just buy you some time for more technology to come along to sort it out.
Exactly.
So how did you cope mentally with every time you get an injection having the flu for a few days? Because that would really bring you down, or would bring most people down in a big way.
Yeah, I always say it sucked, but you got to a point where you had to embrace the suck. And I'll be honest with you, there were days that I prayed to die. I was just like, I am so sick of this. I am so sick of the nausea, the body aches, the fever, everything that we think of as the flu. And it was every week. And you knew that even as you started to get better towards the end of the week, I always took my injections on Saturday night. Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, I was going to feel horrible. And I just remember thinking, we're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be my kind of pain, like cancer or anything like that. I mean, you could flunk a test at school, or break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or, not get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering is what you do with that pain. Do you use that pain to make you a stronger, a tougher, a more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it, and feel sorry for yourself and want people to feel sorry for you? I guess for your audience, I mean, there's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape. I'm a human being. I have bad days. I cry, I get down, I feel sorry for myself. I just don't let myself stay there. And what you do with that pain is a choice, and it's your choice. Do you want to use it to make you better, or do you want to make people feel sorry for you and feel sorry for yourself? That's your choice on how you want to handle it.
So looking back, prior to getting cancer, how would you describe yourself mentally? Would you say that you were a mentally tough person prior to it at all? Or weak? Because some people just are tough, and they just are able to cope with difficult situations seemingly better than others. Were you in that category, or do you think you're just sort of pretty Joe average at that point?
I do. I think I was very much Joe average. I mean, I'd had some knee surgeries back in high school. A couple of them that, I thought might limit my career, the ability to go on and play in college and things like that. And so, I mean, that was a little bit of, I needed to figure this out, and the whole mind controlling your mind, or it's going to control you kind of thing. Because I remember when I went back playing, my mind was like, you're probably a step slower and coaches aren't going to want to recruit you. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level and coaches are still contacting me. So I had to flip that narrative into something positive. So I did learn that when I was like 15. But other than that, I'd say I was just Joe average. I don't think what I do is anything that anybody else couldn't do if they decided that's what they wanted to do.
Right. So, okay, so you had your diagnosis, you were having your treatment to keep it at bay. What happened next?
So 2017, I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. Fortunately, I was at a level 1 trauma center, and they were able to stabilize me before they got me to the ICU. Basically, the fever was a product of the toxicity of the drug, of the interferon. So at that point in time, they're like, you can't take this anymore. It'll kill you. It almost killed me then. So I stopped, and almost immediately the cancer came back. That was 2017. 2018, I had my left foot amputated. 2019, it worked its way up the shin. So I had 2 more surgeries in my shin. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle area grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse in the middle of the pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, and I'm being treated for those right now.
Holy heck. That's just unreal, isn't it? Wow. Yeah. So taking a little bit of a step back for a minute, like through that initial diagnosis and the initial treatment, were you able to hold down a job at all?
No, I really wasn't. And with the interferon and being so sick for 2 or 3 days, I mean, I wanted to get back into the workforce, but it was one of those situations where, I mean, it wouldn't have been fair to a company for me to say, hey, I'll be here maybe a couple days a week. I mean, this was obviously long before COVID hit, and, you could work from home and things like that. So no, I have not worked since 2012. And, that's certainly been frustrating, but that's just the way it went. I tried in some aspects to want to go back. I certainly was never going to be a policeman again. I was never going to be a basketball coach and things like that. So it was like, my job is fighting this disease right now.
So a couple of things with that. One is obviously that then put the financial pressure on your wife to obviously cover for that you weren't working. So I'm interested to hear how that was. And second of all, for you being largely at home, what did you do to keep yourself mentally active in that? Because from my experience, at least in talking to other people, often when you've got not much happening, your mind can run away with itself and you can get out of control. You need to have something to focus on. So first of all, tell me about how it was with your wife and what pressure that put on her. And then I'm interested to know how you then went about managing your day so that you didn't go insane and also, were strong enough to carry on.
Yeah. So my wife has always been the primary breadwinner. I mean, you don't go into law enforcement or to coaching to get rich, at least not high school coaching or anything like that. So my wife has always been the primary breadwinner. And I talk a lot about the one of the things that's gotten me through this is what I call the 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends. And when I was diagnosed with these tumors in my lungs, my doctor wanted me to do chemotherapy. And I was like, it's been 8 years. I'm tired. I'm worn out. I don't really think I want to do that. I mean, I asked him, I'm like, well, would the chemotherapy potentially cure me? And he's like, no, it'll buy you some time. So I'm like, no, I don't think I want to do that, but I'll go home to my family and I'll talk about it. And I told you, it's just my wife and daughter and I go home and I'm telling them about it. And my daughter immediately is like, okay, we got to have a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. What do you mean a family meeting? So we all sit around the kitchen table and we talk about, our different perspectives on chemotherapy. And then my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And of course, my daughter and my wife raised their hand. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm getting outvoted 2-1 here, to take chemotherapy. But I remember back when I was a policeman and when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people that we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. And right. I guess I ended up taking chemotherapy because my wife and daughter weren't ready to lose me yet. And right. I love them more than I love myself. So right. From that aspect, if it had not been for my wife and daughter, I would have been dead. There were several instances. I recall a story when I had my first, or actually my second surgery to take all the lymph nodes out of my groin. I was sent home and I was offered pain medication. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And I get home and I'm on crutches and I need to get 3 stairs into the house from the garage. And I did. And then I needed to get up 7 stairs to a landing and then 7 more stairs to get upstairs. And I got up to the landing and it felt like my groin was literally on fire. I had 40 staples in my groin and they were pulling and pinching and all that kind of, and I looked at my wife and daughter and I'm like, I got to sit down. I can't do this. Now, I told you I was 6'8". I was 240 pounds. My wife and daughter were like, oh, absolutely not. If you sit down, we will never get you up. So my daughter literally grabbed me by the front of my shirt and my wife kind of pushed from behind and they got me up the stairs and they got me into the bed. And I remember thinking, and a lot of times when I speak to groups, I ask them this: who in your life are you pushing and pulling towards your goals? Or maybe more importantly, who's pushing and pulling you towards your goals? If it hadn't been for my family, there's no way I would have gotten up those stairs. I was too stupid not to take the pain medication before I left the hospital. And, I always remember that incident and just think about how we push or pull each other, to get the things we want out of life. And that was incredibly important for me.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. So how did you, as I said before, how did you cope though, not working? What did you do? What did you do then? And I don't know if it's changed now, but what were you doing with your time to fulfill it and as I say, keep your sanity, but also keep yourself positive? Because being at home all the time, you could very easily go down, a dark hole and be very difficult to get out of it.
Yeah, during the 5 years I was on interferon, I didn't do a lot. Sometimes I talk about winning the day, and sometimes winning the day was literally getting out of bed and making it to the couch. I had that little energy, and wow. Just literally sitting on the couch and watch, the whole mind numbing. I'm just going to sit here and watch TV. After that, I started to engage in, I've always loved to read. So reading was big for me. And, when I was able to get to a point, I could not read when I was on interferon. I could not focus. I couldn't, concentrate and things like that. So, there was that 5-year period where, like I told you, there were days I literally prayed to die. I was just like, I was so sick of this. I prayed to God, just take me away from this. But obviously, God wasn't done with me yet. So reading was a big thing. I like to play games on the computer that sort of challenge your mind, make you think and stuff like that. And for the most part, that was it. I did a ton of reading to kind of keep my sanity.
Right. Well, but during that time, though, it was difficult for you to concentrate because of that drug that you were taking, though, you're saying.
It was during those first 5 years. After I got to the point where I was off that and was a little more cognitive, being able to concentrate in that when I had my foot amputated and things like that, I did a lot more reading because I was able to. And like I said, I'd always enjoyed reading. And, I was always the kind, I love reading biographies and autobiographies. I love
same.
figuring out what made people tick and stuff.
Same. So that's why I'm doing this podcast for the same reason. So like in yourself now, are you able to do more? And do you actually feel better in yourself? I mean, because I'm looking at you at the moment and you're seeming very vibrant and like you're capable of doing a lot of things. So how are you feeling now as opposed to that 5-year period when you're on that drug that was kind of like just making you feel flu-like all the time?
Yeah, it is kind of funny when I do podcasts, because you can kind of see me from here up. From here down, I'm in a wheelchair. I have one leg. I mean, there are some differences, obviously from 5-10 years ago. So I just totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So how do you
ask me that question again, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No worries. So how are you feeling now at the moment? Like you're not being suppressed by this constant flu-like feeling. So do you feel better in yourself? I mean, how do you feel at the moment?
No,
or
I
you
can
just
answer that
other
question,
things to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, we're great as human beings wanting to blame somebody. We got to find a reason why something happened. And, I've had people ask me, do you blame God because you got cancer? I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning and checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker, cancer today. No, I don't believe that at all. And I'm not bitter about it. In all honesty, I think cancer has made me a better human being, a better person. And the treatment that I'm on now is pretty, it's not as bad as the interferon, but it's pretty close. I am on a clinical trial drug that more than likely will not save my life, but hopefully, down the road will synthesize a drug that maybe will save somebody else's life. And so I go to the hospital Monday through Friday. I'm infused with this drug, and then I have all kinds of nasty side effects. I throw up, I shake, I have a headache, all that kind of stuff. And then I get 2 weeks off to have my blood counts come back and do things like that. And I remembered back, I talked about my dad being sick when I graduated from college. And my dad had end-stage breast cancer, and they basically told him to go home and die. And he lived for another 3.5 years. And I think he did that because he had a purpose. My dad was in real estate, so he actually went to work up to 2 weeks before he died. And I always kind of tucked that in the back of my mind. I'm like, that might be something I want to hang on to. And so for me now, during this 2-week period, I spend my time on podcasts, being guests on shows like yours, to try to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation, as much love back into the world as I possibly can. And my wife and I kind of, you asked about my wife earlier, we kind of have this ongoing argument. She's like, you need to rest. You need to kind of build. I'm like, you know what? I'll get plenty of rest when I'm dead. So, it's like, hey, these energize me. These give me a purpose in life right now to tell my story and to try to help people. And if I can do that, today's been a good day.
Yeah, and that's an amazing way to look at it. And I mean, for me today, no matter about anybody else, I'm getting the benefit of talking to you. So you've touched me and benefited me. So yeah, I'm appreciative of that. Now, there's a couple of things I want to touch on myself. I want to share with you. Hopefully, it might be of some. Well, I'm sure it'll be some relevance to you. And that is like my story is one that my grandmother was diagnosed with terminal leukemia when I was only a little boy. I think I was only about 7 or might have been even younger when she was diagnosed. So she lived in a different island. New Zealand's made up of 3 main islands, 2 big ones really, and then 1 smaller one. And they were down in the South Island. At that stage, we're in the North Island. So we shifted back to be near my grandmother, so that my mother's mother could spend, final time with her. And I don't know the time frame because, again, I was young, but not that long afterwards, my father was diagnosed with cancer, Hodgkin's disease. And he ended up in hospital at the same time my grandmother was. And at that point, my mother, in the story goes, is that my grandmother was given, a very short time to live. But with, my mum having 4 children, all young, and having her husband in hospital, my grandmother felt that she was needed and she had to be there for my mother to cope with this, for having all these young children. So she, I don't know if you'd say that she went in a remission, because again, I was young and I don't have all the facts, but she certainly didn't die, and she perked up, and she lived for, I'm not sure how many years later, but a few years later. And my mother sort of always said to me that she felt that my grandmother had a purpose until she felt that she knew my dad was going to be okay. And once she knew my dad was going to be okay and he'd be, reinstated to our family, it was at that point that she felt that her purpose was served, and she let go, and then she passed away. So I guess the message that I've always got from that is the power of the mind. Your mind, I sincerely believe that we only know a fraction of the power of the mind, and that we are only capable at this point of only utilizing part of what it's truly capable of. And I feel that my grandmother, that's an example of it, where, if you really want to do something, I think the human's capable of far more than we often realize. For her, she had a purpose, and that was critical for her to stay on. And I think that if she had an ongoing purpose, that she would have probably lived even longer. And I think that's incredibly important, and that's certainly something, that I guess the message I got through my experience in life.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I recall reading a story back in the 1950s. There was a professor at Johns Hopkins University here in the United States that did a very simple experiment with rats. He took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long they could tread water before they would sink and drown. And the average rat made it about 15 minutes. And right before the rats were going to go under and drown, he grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then after a while, he picked them up again, and he put them in that exact same tank of water. Right. And almost to a rat, the rats were able to tread water for 60 hours. Now think about that. Wow. 15 minutes initially, 60 hours a second time, which to me says two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. We've got to have hope. We've got to believe that there's something better, or that we have a bigger purpose other than what we think it is. And two, how much more the human body can give to itself when the need arises. It's very easy to quit in life. Life makes it really, you come up against an impediment. Oh, you know what? That's a little different. I'm not going to do that. But what if you plowed through that impediment? The Navy SEALs, the branch of the military here in the United States, some of the toughest men in the world, they kind of have a story that sort of dovetails with that, the rat story. And they call it the 40% rule. And what they say is that if you're kind of at the end of your rope and you can't do anymore, you can't run another step or swim another lap, that you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left to give to yourself. So, in the story of your grandmother, I mean, think about that. Your grandmother was able to do so much more than you ever, or probably even than she thought she could do. And I think that just goes back to how much our bodies can really do. And all the impediments that we face in our lives, those are impediments that are in most cases self-imposed. Now, oh, that's really hard. I don't think I could do that. The hard is what makes it good. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Yeah. So I love that story. And when you were talking about it, it kind of reminded me of those two stories. And I think it really shows what we can do, whether we think we can or not, if we just keep moving forward.
Yeah. And to your point too, we have, I'm familiar with the Navy SEALs, and we have our own version, which is called the SAS, which is
Special Air
also
Service.
The British, because we're colonized by the British, we copy a lot of what they've done. So they, again, are of the same sort of elite caliber soldiers. And, the thing they say is your mind will give up well before your body will. And yes, there's a program where they, get some average people in, and they put them through sort of some of the SAS training. And it's so true. And I've experienced it myself, and you realize that often it's like your mind goes, oh, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. but you're not really. You're just, your mind has told you you're done, but you're not. You could do a lot more, but it's just convenient to go, oh no, I'm done now. I'm not going to do anymore.
Yeah, and there's a. I know we're probably going to be talking two different words here when I say football. Certainly, American football. There was a Hall of Fame receiver named Jerry Rice, and he had a great quote. He said, "Today I will do what others won't, so that tomorrow I can do what others can't." And it's that same kind of thing. Do you want to get out there? Do you want to take on the challenge and keep going and keep moving forward? Because if you do, all these people over here who'll be like, it's a little hard. I'm hurting. I think, I always think of you probably have seen the movie Rocky. I think it's a classic. There's that scene in Rocky where, he gets up at 4:00 in the morning and he drinks the 5 raw eggs. He puts the raw eggs into the cup and he drinks them. And then he goes out and he runs. And I look at that scene and I think, how many people would get up at 4 a.m. to chase their dreams? How many people would say, oh, wait a minute, I don't have a good breakfast, so I can't do that? How many people, he puts on his old gray, cotton sweatsuit and goes out and runs in his basketball shoes? How many people would say, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the right equipment, or I don't have the running shoes, or I don't have my running partner. There's always an excuse along the way if you want that excuse. Because life makes it very easy to quit. But I love that scene in Rocky where here's this guy, I've got nothing. I don't have the right food. I don't have the right equipment. I don't have a training buddy. I don't have anything, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And it's what I'm motivated to do right now.
And, Terry, the great backstory to that movie is Sylvester Stallone in that script. I remember reading about it, and he got rejected, like it was about 130 times or something. He just constantly got rejected. It was well over 100 times. He put it to people for this movie to be produced, and he got told no. And he kept going and kept going. And look what happened. Whether you like the movie or not, whether you think it's a great caliber movie or not, doesn't matter. The story behind it is incredible. And the fact that he didn't take no for an answer, he kept pushing, and he ultimately got there. Huge inspiration, that he actually did that, and how many of us would have gone out once or twice and got told, oh no, that sucks, oh God, that's awful, and we'll go, oh okay, and we were thrown in the rubbish, we would have moved on. 99% of us would do that, would go, oh gosh, but he didn't. He wasn't taking no for an answer. He absolutely believed in what he was doing, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer, and that's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back, I always think of the story of Edison, Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, talks about, I just found, 999,000 different ways not to make the light bulb, but on that 10,000th time, I found it. I mean, the same thing is the story of Dr. Seuss, how Dr. Seuss he had a story that he was trying to sell, and he had literally just been rejected for like the 120th time, and he's walking home dejected. And he runs into an old college buddy on the streets of New York City who had just taken a job as a publisher of children's books at a local publisher in New York. And you think, I'm sure he figured this was the end. I'm going to have to do something else with my life. But you just kept going. And boom, you run into this friend. And now you're Dr. Seuss.
Yeah. Amazing, isn't it?
It is.
So with you, interesting question I wanted to ask. With you before you got cancer and then afterwards, in terms of your religious faith, did that change? Like, were you particularly religious beforehand? And how if at all, that's changed? And I mean, this isn't like a big religious discussion, but I think there's an importance, whether it's religion or something. I think it's important that you've got to believe in something to help keep you going. And I'm just interested to know to what extent maybe, you were religious beforehand, and what if that's changed at all, and what role it's really played in you being able to get through as you have so far.
Yeah, I talked a minute ago about the 3 F's, faith, family, and friends. Faith has played a tremendous role in this whole cancer journey. I have always been religious. I was born and raised Roman Catholic. I still am Roman Catholic. I'm not going to get, like you said, it's not a religious discussion. So, but for me, it's part of it, realizing you're part of something bigger than yourself. And that's also something, I learned when I was in team sports, that if you don't do your job on a team, not only do you let yourself down, you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game we all play is this game of life. And as I alluded, this clinical trial drug that I'm on is probably not going to save my life. But I'll tell you, those times when I'm sitting there and I'm throwing up and I'm shaking and I feel lousy, I always remember, no, this is part of something that's bigger than you. And I think that's something that religion or faith or whatever you want to call it has really solidified in my life. That, there's so much criticism today, especially among young people, about, the attitude of what's in it for me. That's the wrong question. It's not about what's in it for you. It's about what we can do together, because individually we can't do squat. I don't care, if you're Serena Williams and you're the greatest tennis player in the world. Well, guess what? She had a coach, she had a manager, she had there's always for lack of a better word, a posse, around even an individual who is exceptional at one thing. And I think this attitude of, it's all about me. It's not about you. It's about us. And if we would come together collectively, there would be so much more that we could get done instead of just screaming at each other, saying, you're on the left, I'm on the right, you're for this, I'm for that. It doesn't, all that stuff doesn't matter, because if you think about it, in the end, power, prestige, money, none of that stuff goes with us beyond the grave. The only thing that does is the love that we have in our heart. And if we love each other, imagine how much we could get done. And from my perspective, God is love. God put us here knowing all the dumb, stupid, idiotic, sinful things we were going to do to try to make a difference in his world. So why wouldn't you go out there and figure out why you were put on the face of this earth and live that purpose?
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately in life these days, it seems like so much is geared towards being very selfish and all being about yourself, as opposed to the greater good, the collective good. And there was potentially a day of reckoning for that. I mean, irrespective of religion, we just look at the whole, the world, in terms of the environment. If we keep thinking just about ourselves and gratifying ourselves and don't think about the greater good of the world, well, we're heading for trouble. Whether you're into the global warming or not, I don't think you have to think too hard or be particularly intelligent to realize that all this pollution, all these things that we do, has to have some sort of harmful impact. And there has to be a day of reckoning on that at some point in time.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we just go, oh, well, that's someone else's problem in the future? Or actually go, well, okay, well, we've got our children and their children. Don't we think we need to step up and do our bit to try and address the issue?
Yeah, it's being good stewards of what we've been given, and whether it's the planet or your job or your family or your kids, whatever it is, it's being good stewards of those resources. And I agree with you. I've always said here in the United States, we've probably got 80% of the people that are good, decent, honest, law-abiding people that just want the best for their family, their community, and their country. And then you got the 10% of the goofs on the left and the 10% of the goofs on the right that get all the publicity and in the news every night. And it's like, you don't represent what most of the people in this country, stand for or want. But for some reason, you seem to be the people that get all the talking points when the news comes on at night.
Yeah, I know. And obviously in America, it's been pretty turbulent times, unfortunately, over there. And as a bystander, it's just like, I shake my head at some of the stuff. And as you say, it's a minority that are getting all the attention and making the whole country look bad when it's not representative of the average American at all.
No, it's not. And that's frustrating because I mean, as a police officer and all those years that I did that job, I mean, there was always, there's problems with the police. I mean, the police are probably the most visible government agency, that we have. And so the problems are always with the police. And it's like, that's fine. But, I didn't work for the dope dealer or the prostitute I worked for the single mom with 3 kids that was just trying to get by. That's the person I wanted to help and make a difference in their lives. Not that I didn't want to help the drug dealer or the prostitute or something like that. But, again, life is about choices, and the choices you make are going to put you in the situations where you're going to have a good life. You're not going to have, you're going to have a bad life, or you're going to have something in between. So, I mean, I think that's so important, is that we are a product of our choices. And I've always believed that everything we need to be successful in life is already inside us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it to our benefit.
And how do we do that, Terry? How do we pull that out from within us? How do we
knew how to write a book and go live on an island in Jamaica or something like that? I just think you again, if you realize that you're part of something that's bigger than us. I mean, even if you go back, to the Bible, if you go back to Genesis, and God made man and blah, blah. And I understand, the interpretation is, the Bible is open to interpretation on some count. And, and God realized it was not good for the man to be alone. So he put him to sleep. He took his rib. He made woman. And I think the important part, or the important lesson is that we're not supposed to be alone. It's not supposed to be about just us. It's supposed, us individually. It's supposed to be about us collectively. And I think if you keep that in mind as you go through your life, and I've always believed that all our purposes, whether you're a painter, or whether you're a businessman, or whether you're a doctor, whatever you are, our purpose in life is service, to serve other people, to serve this planet, to leave our children a better life than the one that was given to us. And I'm not sure we're doing a very good job of that right now.
And for you, have you felt that you've got the most satisfaction, the most enjoyment when you've been doing that, when you've been doing something for others as opposed to something for yourself? I mean, when you reflect back, where do you think you've got your most enjoyment in your life? What things have you done that have given you the most joy?
I think, if you kind of look at, the best of times, the worst of times, so to speak, the best of times have always been when I've given of myself to other people. And the worst of times have always been when I've been selfish, and that selfishness has turned to something that has hurt another individual. I don't have very many regrets in my life, but the regrets that I have are the ones where I was selfish, and because of that selfishness, somebody else got hurt. And I can't do a lot about that now. You can never go back and live your life, but you can certainly start from where you are right now and move forward. And if you don't like the way things are, you can always change those things. It's a choice. It's up to you on how you want to live. It's up to you how you want to die, and it's up to you how you want to be remembered.
So you've obviously have had a lot of dark moments. In those moments, how do you get yourself out of it? What do you do to keep yourself going? Because it'd be very easy, like we touched on before, when you think, oh, I'm done, that's it, I've got no more. When we know from experience that there is a lot more there, but you just got to tell your mind that you're not actually done. Your body's actually got more left in it. But how do you, in those challenging moments, how do you get through that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's funny. When I found out I had my leg was going to be amputated and I had these tumors in my lungs, I went to the cemetery, to the mortuary, to the church, and I planned my funeral. And I got some brushback from that. People were kind of like, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And, I kind of looked at them like, well, last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. But, the point I was trying to make is that everybody dies, but not everybody really lives. And, for me, there's a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that I just love. And it goes like this. It says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I'm trying to get to. That's what I'm trying to do. And, again, remembering that you're part of something bigger than just you helps me get through those
Yeah.
dark times.
Yeah. And for you, like you touched on before, going through this treatment that you are at the moment, you don't necessarily believe that it's going to cure you, but you feel like you got a sense of purpose that it may not cure you, but it's a part of the journey to help cure others in the future. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are, and it's interesting because a couple months ago, my oncologist showed me my CAT scan photographs from back in 2020, and I don't have any medical background whatsoever, but I kind of know what's supposed to be where and stuff like that. And he showed me my lungs, and I had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs. I had these big tumors that were inside my lungs, and I remember looking at them, and I'm like, how was I alive? And he was like, I don't know. And what that said to me is, you know what? God's not done with me yet. And so I'm going every day and giving it everything I have. And when the time comes for me to die, I'm okay with that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want to hasten it or anything like that. But when it happens, I think if you live your life, and when I was a policeman and certainly this 9-year battle with cancer, I've seen a lot of people die. And I'm going to make a huge generalization here. But, Paul, for what you and I would probably consider a peaceful death, those people for me have been the people that went out and lived their purpose, found it and lived it.
Yeah.
And now when they die, it's peaceful, as opposed to the people who kind of just muddle through life and, they act kind of casual in the way they live. And as a result, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations, they become a casualty of that unplanned living. And when they die, those are the people that want another, day, another month, another year. So as long as you get out there, figure out the reason you were put on this earth and live it, death isn't nearly as scary as opposed to people just kind of muddle through life.
And I think the vast majority of us are in that group of muddling through life. It's so easy to do. I feel that we don't, myself included, don't value time as much as we should. We should remember every day that it's the one and only, that day will only happen once. You can't repeat it. And we need to make more of it and appreciate it more, embrace it. So even if you are having a difficult day, it's still that day. It's still your life. You're still alive to get to experience it. So take the positive out of that, because we only get one shot of this. We don't get to come back and repeat it.
You're right. And you don't have to look too far to find somebody else who's a whole lot worse off than you. I recall the last time I was having treatment and I was so depleted. It was towards the end of the week, physically and mentally and emotionally. I was kind of down and I was getting ready to get on the elevator to leave. And off the elevator comes this man who can barely breathe. I mean, he's having such a hard time breathing. And the first thing that clicked in my mind was, yeah, there's somebody who's a whole lot worse off than you. Yeah. Stop feeling sorry for yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a great message. And that's something that I try and hold on to too, is that when you're kind of getting a bit down on yourself, remembering that you might think you're having a bad time, you might be having challenges, but absolutely guarantee there'll be someone out there that is worse off than you. So put that in perspective, and it's not quite so bad after all.
Exactly. There's always somebody that's willing to trade places with you that doesn't, whether you don't like your house or your job or wherever it is, there's always somebody out there that'd be willing to trade places with you in a heartbeat.
I found for me, Terry, obviously I haven't been through what you have, but, I've had my challenges and what I've kind of tried to teach myself, or it just came naturally actually, but I try and hold on to, is when I have a dark moment, I just try and think of one positive thing. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be the sun shining outside. It could be, I don't know, anything. It doesn't have to be big. And I try and focus on that and think about that and really embrace that, and then block out all the negative stuff that's happening in that day. And that for me has helped me get through some fairly challenging times. Without that, it's all consuming, and it's like it pulls you down this dark hole. And if you're not careful, you won't get out of it. But there's always something positive out there. There's something that you can see or find to think about that makes you realize, well, it's not so bad after all,
It is.
That's kind of what I've done.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I've, over these last 9 years, I've kind of developed what I call my four truths. And these are things that are kind of, in the bedrock of my soul, so to speak. And I'll give them to you. They're just one sentence there, and I have them on a Post-it note here sitting on my office. And the first one goes to exactly what you were saying, and it's control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. So, if you're negative, switch that to something positive. And if you don't, that negativity is just going to go ahead and build on itself. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is we need to embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that to make you a stronger and more determined individual. The brain likes the status quo, but the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to become a better person is if you step outside your comfort zone. But the brain likes the comfort zone. Yeah. Hey, things are good right now. Don't mess with that. But the only way you're going to grow is to get outside your comfort zone. And I always tell people, every day you should do one thing at least that makes you uncomfortable or that is difficult, because that's going to help you to grow. And the next time something difficult happens, you're going to be like, hey, I did it for this. I can do it for that. So that's number two. Number three is kind of a legacy truth, for lack of a better word. And it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. So I'm not telling people they, should live a life that somebody else wants them to live. I don't think they should. But I always ask people, what would your ancestors feel about the life that you lived? I mean, your ancestors set the table for you. Now it's up to you to take that and set the table for the next generation. What are people going to say about you at your funeral? And again, not telling you to live a life that somebody else wants you to live, but think about what people are going to say about you. And if you don't like that now, you've got time to make changes. And then number four is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I always say that my pain is going to end someday. It may end through surgery, it may end through medication. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give in to pain, pain will always be a part of my life.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's one heck of a story, though. It's easy for people to say these things, but to actually live it, to go through it as you have, it's one heck of a journey to go through. But we have so many challenges in our lives, haven't we? And you just have to embrace it, because you can't necessarily change it. So you've got to find the good in it to get through it, don't you?
Exactly. Now,
in New Zealand, we have one of the highest rates of youth suicide, which is troubling. I'm not quite sure why it is. You'd think, in our country that we wouldn't, but we do. So, one of the things for me is this interview is hopefully, if young people watch this, and they're feeling in that sort of frame of mind, that this might give them some inspiration that it need not be that, and there are options. But can I ask you just to kind of address that for people that are feeling suicidal? What would be your advice to them?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. I always say that, Paul, if I'd never met you, if I didn't know who you are, but I knew the 5 people that you hung around with the most, I could probably tell you almost everything that was important about you. So I guess for the people maybe who aren't at that stage yet, surround yourself with people that care about you. Surround yourself with people that want to uplift you and that have your best interest in mind. And again, keep in mind that, having your best interest in mind may mean they're going to have to say some tough things to you that, hey, Terry, you're messing up here. I wouldn't do that. And you can't be like, hey, I'm a fair weather friend. If you don't say what I want you to say, you're not my friend anymore. You got to surround yourself with those good, decent people that care about you and want to uplift you. So all these people that are bullying you, and I get it for kids. They want to be part of the group. They want to be part of the in-group. And if they're not, and all these kids are bullying them online or, even face-to-face at school and things like that, those words, that bullying only hurts if you internalize it, if you take it. As a policeman, I'd take you off the air if I told you all the things, all the names I've been called. Those names don't hurt because I don't let them affect me. When people say bad things about you, I think back when I was 13 years old, I was 6'5". I was incredibly skinny. I had a size 14 shoe that I had a real narrow foot, and my ears looked like Dumbo. My head had not caught up to my ears yet. And I got teased mercilessly because of the way I looked. But I took that hate or that, vitriol that those people were throwing at me, and I turned it to basketball. And down the end of that path was I went to college for free. I went to college on a basketball scholarship where everybody else paid for it. So I understand what it's like to be bullied. I understand what it's like for people to say, you know what, yeah, you're no good, or you're ugly, or, you're stupid, or whatever you want to say. That only hurts if you internalize it. So surround yourself with people that are good for you. And if you are thinking of killing yourself, if you are thinking of taking your life, and I'm going to add another part to that here in a minute, seek help. Seek help. And if you think you know somebody who is going to kill themselves or is going to harm themselves in some way, ask them directly. You're not going to, just because you said, hey, Paul, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Hey, Paul, are you thinking about killing yourself? You're not going to make Paul do it because you asked. But those people that, I think I know something, or I have a feeling, that's one thing I learned as a negotiator when I was on the police department. You're not going to make somebody do something by asking them about it. So if you're a real friend and you think one of your friends is going to hurt themselves, ask them about it. And if they are, get them some help.
Right. Now, tell me, Terry, you have written a book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the book's called, why you've written it, and what's it about?
The book is called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And the book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former basketball player that I had coached in high school who moved to Colorado. And my wife and I had dinner with her and her fiance a couple times. And I remember saying to her, I'm really excited you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And she kind of looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on this earth and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me and he said, could you tell me what you think are the most important things I should learn to not only be successful in my job or in business, but in life? And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others scenario. I wanted to see if I could go deeper. So I thought about it for a while. I took some notes. I really kind of wanted to put some time in it. And eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles, and I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally between the time I had my leg amputated in April of 2020 and the time I started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs in June of 2020, while I was healing, I sat down at the computer every day and I just built stories as examples of how people have lived those principles. And that's how the book came to be. And kind of a funny story about that, I'd never published a book before. And so I was like, well, now I've got this book. What do I do? Like, well, I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I had a best-selling author over in the UK who I had connected with on LinkedIn who kind of pulled me aside, so to speak. And he's like, Terry, you're missing the point. Your job is not to sell books. Your job is to help people. If you help people, your books will sell themselves. And I was so glad he did that for me.
And what happened? So did you end up self-publishing, or you found yourself a publisher to put it through? How did that work?
Yeah, I did. I found a publisher through a friend of mine. As I mentioned, I'd been a police officer and I'd done undercover narcotic work. And I was introduced to a man who ran a narcotics task force in the state of Louisiana here in the United States, and then was also a police chief in a city in Louisiana. And one day, one of his friends said, hey, will you come out to California and put on a presentation for authors who want to understand police tactics and use them in their books? And he's like, yeah, sure. So he goes out there and he does this seminar and he ends up meeting his wife. And his wife is a like 34, 35 time New York Times best-selling author, a fiction author, and they get married. He gets out of law enforcement, and they started a not-for-profit Christian publishing company. And I got hooked up with him, and that's how the book got published.
Wow, amazing. So for you, would you describe writing the book as being therapeutic for you?
You know, I think it goes back again to something bigger than myself. I really feel that, you know, I sort of joke, and I thought, you know, God was like, all right, dummy, sit down at the computer and just type what I tell you to type, and you're going to have a book. You know, I mean, there's that. I was really, after I had my leg amputated, kind of at a crossroads. You know, I really didn't know where I was going. I really didn't have a lot of goals or anything. And I would lay in bed at night and, you know, kind of just look up at the ceiling. And there's that old joke about, you know, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So, you know, God never talked to me in any way, but people started to suggest, you ought to write a book. You ought to write a book. And of course, I'm dismissing it like, I've never written a book before. What do you mean I should write a book? But I'm also smart enough to, I think, realize that if enough people are starting to tell me that maybe I should do something, and those are people that, again, I've surrounded myself with, who I believe in and believe in me, that maybe I ought to buck up and think about, yeah, maybe that's something I ought to do.
And what's the plan from here? Have you got any other books on the horizon?
You know, my Sustainable Excellence is a book about success. And I think that's great. But I think I'd like my second book, and I'm kind of compiling stuff now. I haven't started writing yet. I think I'd like my second book to be about another word that begins with S, and that's significance. You know, success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for other people. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you can be successful and significant, but I would like to focus that second book on really finding out how people can be significant in other people's lives.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that would be a great book to write, and it'd be a great book to read. So I hope you go forward and do that.
Thank you.
And one thing that I have to say, Terry, and it is that you look really healthy. You look really good. How does that work? How can you be sick but look so good?
That's a great question. I don't know. There's some people tell you I don't look that good. My brother always tells me I have a face for radio and I shouldn't be on any kind of electronic media where you see my face.
Nice.
I think part of it is, you know, yes, I get all these ugly chemicals in my body and things like that. But I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink, you know, pop. I try to, you know, it's funny. One of the diagnostic tools that I used to go through, I use it. They use CAT scans now, but it was called a PET scan. And the way a PET scan worked is they inject radioactive sugar into your body, with the idea being that cancer cells have a higher metabolism and they will pick up that radioactive sugar at a higher rate than your normal cells will. So your tumors kind of light up on the screen. And you know, I didn't think it took a genius to figure out that, well, if that's the case with sugar, maybe I should limit my sugar intake. So that's another thing that I do. I don't usually have desserts, or if I do, it'll be a sugar-free pudding or something like that. Right. So I just try to do as much to try to, I mean, if you saw me after these treatments, you wouldn't say I look good. I mean, I'm really just kind of just beat. I mean, I'm all hunched over. I'm really tired. I'm sick to my stomach. You know, all the ugly things that we think about chemotherapy, although my drug is not a chemotherapy drug. You know, so I try to do what I can to help myself stay healthy. And I am on the second week of my off week. So, you know, that's probably why I look a little bit better than I would last week. So I start again on Monday and we'll go at it again.
Wow. Well, I have to say, Terry, you're an absolute inspiration. I mean, to go through what you're going through is incredible. Having had it touch my life through my father and my grandmother and my uncle and that as well, I've certainly seen my fair share of it, but certainly not to your extent. But yeah, from that experience, I probably have just a little bit more understanding maybe than some people. So for me, yeah, I think you're amazing, and I just really wanted to talk to you because, yeah, it's incredible what you're doing and inspirational, and I just hope people can watch this or listen to this and get the value out of it, because there is so much value in it.
Well,
Our lives are not nearly as bad as we think they are. We can talk to someone else and find out other people have got a lot more struggles than us, and we need to sometimes give ourselves a bit of an uppercut and realize that we're being a bit silly, and things are just simply not in perspective, and appreciate what you got rather than what you don't have.
Well, Paul, I thank you for having me on. I always say that it's nice people like you that let me come on, and hopefully between our conversation today, we're going to make a difference in somebody's life. And if we do that, today's been a good day.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Terry. Really appreciate it. And I'm wanting to stay in touch and give you whatever support I can, and hope you carry on with your journey and continue to conquer it as you have done so far. So well done to you.
I appreciate that.